women on a mission.
We asked you to tell us who's left you feeling ripped off. And you contacted us in your thousands by post, email, even stopping us on the street. And the message could not be clearer.
There's too much focus on profit and less on customer care.
It's so hard to complain. Companies make it so difficult to complain.
You told us with money tighter than ever, you need to be sure that every pound counts.
All my money is very hard earned, so when I go to spend it, I expect value for money.
So whether it's a deliberate rip-off, a simple mistake, or a catch in the small print, we'll find out why you're out of pocket and what you can do about it. Your stories, your money. This is Rip Off Britain. Hello and thanks for joining us once again on Rip Off Britain, the series that, whether it's pounds or pennies, sets out to make sure that your money goes exactly where you would expect it to and buys you just what you thought it would. But as you'll see today, the sad reality is that your cash isn't always as safe as you'd hope.
And there are always people coming up with new ways to try and relieve you of it. But, you know, money can be lost for all sorts of reasons, and not all of them are malicious. So when you've been left out of pocket, it isn't always easy to know what you can do, or indeed where you can turn.
So as we look into more of the stories you've asked us to investigate, we won't just be unravelling what's happened to any money that's gone missing. We'll also be trying to make sure your cash stays where it belongs, and that if something goes wrong, you know exactly what to do.
Coming up, how this couple's plans at saving for the future have instead left them with nothing.
Looking back now, I've got a whole raft of questions that I know I should have asked, but I didn't at the time.
Why one of the biggest threats to national security probably isn't what you think.
I felt really, really angry as soon as I realised that I'd been scammed for this amount of money. I think a lot of it was personal pride that I hadn't checked up.
And our pop-up shop draws in the crowds in Liverpool.
Now, we're used to you telling us about situations where things just haven't worked out quite the way you expected. But what happened to this next couple could hardly have been worse. And the real shame of it is that they only got caught up in the whole sorry mess because they were trying to make sensible choices for the future. But it's ended up with them losing a small fortune with absolutely nothing to show for it. And rubbing salt into the wound is the fact that despite everything that they've lost, they are still having to pay a monthly fee for what, as far as they're concerned, is no good reason whatsoever. Of all the many kinds of unwanted cold calls, regulator Ofcom says 4% are about pensions, and with good reason. Around a quarter of us have at least one pension that we've forgotten about after changing jobs or even after losing the paperwork. And that adds up to almost £3 billion stuck in unclaimed pension pots. It's not something that Ian and Karen Ross from Basingstoke had really thought about until one evening in early 2011 when they got a cold call offering to help them find those pots and make use of the money.
It was a very personable guy on the phone, and he just asked me, did I have any pension provision, did I have any old works pensions that were frozen? And I suspected that I did, and he said he'd have a look into it for us and see if there was any value left in these pensions. What I know about pensions, you could, write on a very small piece of paper. I've just relied really on advice that comes through from my employer. He was somebody that was saying, look, I'll do all the work for you. I'll find out about these things for you, and I'll help you with it. And it was a relief, and it was very, very exciting as well.
A few weeks after that cold call, a financial advisor rang with news that knocked Ian for six. He'd discovered that Ian's old company pensions were now worth just over £23,000.
At this news, I was really quite excited. It was a windfall. I would liken it, I suppose, to winning the lottery. It was money that I didn't know I had, money I didn't really give any thought to. And all of a sudden, there's somebody on the end of the phone who I developed a little bit of a relationship with, who was telling me that I had a substantial sum of money, and he'd found it for me. I was very, very happy.
But what do you do with £23,000 you never knew you had? Well, the financial advisor had a suggestion. He recommended that Ian invest in a type of pension product called a SIP, which stands for Self-Invested Personal Pension.
They're designed to give investors a greater choice over where their money goes, but they also come with a considerable risk, so they're not normally recommended to people who don't know a lot about trading and investments.
It seemed a good idea to invest in something that was going to be a growth for the future, especially as it was explained to me, it's money I never knew I had anyway.
Convinced that the investment was the best way to go, Ian signed the forms to invest his £23,000 pension pot. And over the next year, he and Karen thought little more about it, until in March of 2012, when they received a very unwelcome letter.
One day I was at home and the post came, and I opened a letter addressed to Ian, and it stated that the company that we had our pension with was being investigated by the Serious Fraud Office, and that our funds and our pension had been put in the hands of the administrators.
It seemed that the company into which Ian had put his money was being investigated by the Serious Fraud Office, and it soon became clear that Ian and Karen's investment was now worth next to nothing.
I was distraught. I was really, really upset. I could not believe that this money had gone. I had a raft of feelings, emotions. I was angry. I didn't want to believe it.
Karen called Ian at work to break the news.
My initial reaction from the phone call was shock, as you can well imagine. I just suddenly realised all this sales patter, I'd fallen for it. And now, this money that I never knew I had, I no longer had.
But Karen was determined to get to the bottom of what had happened and to try and get some of the money back.
I contacted our financial advisor and said, look, this is what's happened, and he was very blasé about the situation and told me not to worry and everything would be okay.
But Ian and Karen kept investigating, and as they looked into the investment further, it seemed that not all of the £23,000 that Ian had started off with had gone into the same place, so it wasn't all lost.
We noticed that the funds, once they'd been released, were split in two, and several £1,000s was left in a bank account, effectively cash.
But then Ian got his next shock. The bank account that the money was in was held in joint names. One was his, but the other in the name of a firm who specialise in managing the type of pension that Ian had invested in.
And I tried to find out, well, what could I do with this money? But the upshot of it was that I couldn't do anything with the money unless I had permission.
Instead, the company administering Ian's SIPP were taking fees from the account to do so. And though the company did suspend the fees while they investigated the situation, they reinstated them when they found that their contract to administer the doomed pension still stood.
I was absolutely amazed that they were still taking money to administer a pension that actually had no money in it. And when I asked them why they were taking the fee, the response was that they were legally entitled to by the forms that we'd signed, and therefore that's what they were going to do.
So the remainder of Ian's unexpected windfall is being whittled down in fees to pay for something that he's been told has no value. And even that wasn't the end of his troubles. When Ian contacted the FSA, which has since become the Financial Conduct Authority, to see if any of his money could be reclaimed, he was horrified to learn that the firm that their financial advisor had told them he worked for had no record of their investment at all. It turned out that he'd no longer been working for them at the time. As a result, he didn't come under the FSA's jurisdiction, and there was nothing that they could do.
The thing, I suppose, that I'm most angry about is that we did do our research. As far as we knew, we're not sophisticated people financially. We went to the FSA. The individuals at first appeared to be regulated by the FSA. We thought we were protected, but it turns out that we weren't.
Ian and Karen have registered with the liquidators handling the company in which their money was invested, but it's not clear if they'll ever see any of their money again.
I'm left feeling frustrated, humiliated, angry. Overriding emotion is one of embarrassment.
Ian and Karen admit to not being fully aware of the risks, and financial expert Paul Lewis says this is not the kind of scheme that ordinary investors should be persuaded to get involved in.
Karen and Ian were encouraged to put their money into a risky SIPP, and of course advisors will say high risk means high reward. No, it doesn't. High risk means the chance of a bigger reward, but also the chance that you will lose your money, as they did. If you don't know anything about investing, the last thing you want is a self-invested pension. You should just put it in a stakeholder pension or something like that, which is relatively safe and charges are low.
Ian and Karen wish they'd known all of that before they sank their money into a SIPP.
I didn't understand what a SIPP was, and it's only recently that I have actually understood what we've actually invested in.
Looking back now, I've got a whole raft of questions that I know I should have asked, but I didn't at the time.
We contacted the financial advisor who got Ian into this mess in the first place, but he has not answered any of our questions. However, there was a bit of good news when we wrote to the company still taking a fee for administering Ian's pension. They explained that they were doing so because there's a prospect that some money may yet be returned to creditors over the medium to long term. And during that time, they still have to produce annual reports to both Ian and the regulator. But in view of the position faced by investors and recognition of the lower volume of administration required, they've now reduced their annual fee by a third. And what's left in the account, a balance of £2,080, Ian can now transfer to another scheme without the usual fee. But what happened to Ian and Karen is a reminder that you need to be very wary of any investment opportunity that comes in a cold call out of the blue. And if it's from someone offering to help you find any pension pots you may have lying around, you can do that for free through a government service, so you don't need the help of the person on the phone.
Of course I'm angry. It was very much sold to me as money I never knew I had. So looking back, maybe that should have rung an alarm bell for me. As soon as somebody takes the attitude of it's money you never knew you had, it might make me think, well, I don't know I've got it, but obviously you want it.
Now, if you were asked to name the biggest threat to British security today, you might say something like international terrorism. But categorised at the same level of risk is cybercrime, the very real danger of criminals and rogue states targeting computer systems in the UK. And if all that sounds a bit too much like the plot of a Hollywood blockbuster, the sobering reality is that every day, whenever we turn on a computer, most of us are already under attack, whether that's from hackers after your cash or some other kind of online fraudster. Here's what to watch out for to stay safe online. The British economy is under attack. The UK is now the #1 target for internet gangsters, with estimates that they and their crimes are costing the economy up to £27 billion a year.
Cybercrime is a huge threat to the UK, to Europe and to the rest of the world. We do know that it's big and that it's significant, and it's very, very difficult to quantify.
British business earns £1 in every £5 from the internet. It's a crucial part of the economy that allows us to trade around the world. But 93% of large companies and 76% of small ones reported an internet security breach in the last year. One of them was Jake Kelly's business, subject to a single but very costly attack in May this year. It came after Jake ordered an expensive piece of kit from one of his regular suppliers in China. They'd been working together for years, so Jake had no reason to think anything was wrong when he got an email about a change of address.
Most of my correspondence with China is via email and via Skype. I received this email saying that there's a potential virus, please use this email address from now on. And I just took it as read they've got a virus and used the new email address.
The email looked as if it was from his supplier. But unbeknown to Jake, that supplier had received a very similar email too, one that looked as if it was from Jake, and it said that thanks to a virus, Jake had had to change his email address. Neither side had cause to suspect that what they were being told was untrue.
I just carried on the communication as I normally would have done.
Over the next few days, Jake and the supplier both sent emails to each other about the order, and they both got replies that they thought were legitimate. Little did they know they were caught in what's called a man-in-the-middle attack. Every email was being intercepted by a fraudster who was leading Jake to believe that his order was all in hand.
I'm chasing now the delivery of the machine that we've ordered, and I get a reply back saying that the machine is now ready, please pay into this new account. And it wasn't their normal account, it was a new bank account with an address of Spain. I was a bit suspicious about this, so I did ask them to come back and please reconfirm where we wanted to send this money to, and they confirmed the same Spanish bank account. So we made the payment.
But as the afternoon went on, Jake couldn't shake the sense of doubt, and he slowly realised that the Spanish bank account he'd just transferred almost £40,000 into had nothing to do with his supplier.
The ball's dropping now slowly, and this situation's become real, that we've been scammed, and I've just lost this huge amount of money.
Hoping he was wrong, Jake called his bank trying to stop the payment, but it had already left his company's account.
I felt really, really angry as soon as I realised that I'd been scammed for this amount of money. I think a lot of it was personal pride, that I hadn't checked up and seen what was happening.
His next call was to his insurance company.
I figured this was a theft, so we should have insurance on our commercial policy to cover this loss of money. So we asked the question to our insurance company whether we have insurance for this type of theft, and the answer to come back was no, we don't. This is a cyber crime.
Because Jake willingly transferred the money, there was nothing his bank or insurer could do. The police told him to report the crime to Action Fraud, the UK's National Fraud Reporting Centre, but there wasn't sufficient evidence at that stage for police to investigate.
Right now, I've accepted that money's gone. It's been stolen, it's gone from us, and I really don't have any hope at all of reclaiming this money. If we weren't a strong company, that could potentially bankrupt us. So it was a real large amount of money, and it hurts us. It does hurt us.
More than 3/4 of small businesses like Jake's have reported an internet security breach in the year up to February 2013. And amidst growing concern, the Federation of Small Businesses has carried out in-depth research into the impact of cybercrime on its members.
Cybercrime in a business sense can be the simplest phishing email that we all too often have come through our email boxes, right through to individual or corporate identity theft, which can have a hugely damaging impact, of course, on the business. It's a big issue as far as government's concerned, and it's a big issue as far as our members are concerned. And if you look at the figures that came out of that survey, then it is costing the average small business around about £4,000, which for the total number of businesses is around about 800 million. That's not an insignificant amount of money. So cybercrime is very much at the top of everyone's agenda.
Keeping the UK safe in cyberspace will later this year become the responsibility of the newly formed National Cybercrime Unit.
Many of the traditional offences that you would have seen taking place in the traditional, normal physical world have a place now in the cyber world. So things like fraud, things like identity theft, things like child exploitation.
The crimes may be common and the threat real, but a significant proportion of online crime isn't reported.
One of the big issues we have is the reluctance of businesses and individuals to report these cases. You know, for business, I think the main concern has always been around commercial reputation. You know, is our money safe with them if they're the subject of cyber attack? And many individuals who are the victims of cybercrime don't report it because A, they're not sure if the police is the right agency, and B, because they will go to their internet service provider and think that that's an appropriate way to report.
A new training programme will see all police officers trained in cybercrime. But in the meantime, there's a lot we can all do to stop the crimes happening in the first place.
Please protect your computer, because if you protect it, it's very unlikely that the vast majority of hackers would be able to get anywhere near it. The analogy I use is, would you go out now in your car and park it in the high street and leave the doors wide open with all your goods on view and walk away? I would suggest you wouldn't do that. Then why are we prepared to leave our computers wide open and all of the very important private data we have on there available to people who could hack into it?
But protecting yourself is about more than just getting the right software in place. For Jake, the scam that cost him £40,000 was carefully planned, and it preyed on the trust he had with his supplier. So guarding against cybercrime requires vigilance too.
I wish in hindsight I'd picked up the phone and spoke to somebody and checked out to see whether these emails I was receiving were actually from our supplier, not from a potential scammer. We lost £40,000. It's a huge amount of money that's going to have a big impact on our business.
Still to come, a year after we first called in, what's happened to the family businesses driven to the edge by a product sold to them by their banks?
I'm sure this was the closest we actually came to closing the door for the last time, because we were simply about to run out of money.
We're in Liverpool, here for one weekend only with our pop-up shop. We brought along a team of experts to give you advice.
Make it very clear, they don't give you a full refund within 14 working days, then you'll pursue the matter through the courts.
So we could try and get your problems resolved. And what did you make of the advice you got?
No, absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much for that.
This year, for the first time, we were also out on the streets so that we could give you advice while you shopped.
Think about the personal information that you're giving away. You are often sharing information that criminals need to steal your identity.
Gloria, don't you love the workshops that we've got now? I've just done one on pensions. We just had a great time. You've got a pension?
I do.
Yeah?
5% from the company, 5% from me.
And was that your idea or theirs?
Oh, they're a fantastic idea.
So you wouldn't have thought to do it yourself?
Oh, I would, definitely. I'm very financially savvy now.
You are?
You wouldn't know it, but I really am.
I think Liverpool's been a great place for us to pioneer that as well, because the people here are so wonderful.
John came to visit us after getting a letter about his pension that he just didn't understand.
I'm confused with the small print. The long words, I'm not that well up on that type of thing.
This is what you call a final salary pension scheme. What it says in this letter here is that now the transfer value of what you've got in your pension is just under £18,000.
John wants to know whether it's worth withdrawing the money now as a lump sum, or should he wait?
Because this is a final salary scheme, it's probably not worth you taking your money out here. And actually, if you're reading on in the letter, it says that if you try and cash it in, you're going to have less than £9,000. Whereas if you stay in this scheme, when you turn 65, this pension is going to start paying you an income for the rest of your life.
James does the sums to work out exactly how much more John will end up with by leaving the money where it is.
So probably we'll get about £900 a year out of this, paid from next year when you're 65 until you die. You're winning. They're going to keep on paying, and if you take this money now, you know, nice to have it in the bank as it is, you know, financially, it probably won't make sense over the long run unless you died in the next sort of 10 years or so.
The chance of you getting bumped up by these people then?
Well, in their interest to get you bumped off, isn't it? So I'd say don't take your money out of this. Yeah. Keep it in there.
That's clever. Yeah.
Brilliant. OK. Well, good luck with it.
There can't be many of us who haven't at some point dreamed of living a luxury lifestyle where our money works hard while we sit back and enjoy ourselves. And coming up next are a couple who were told they really could live the high life. All they had to do was invest in an exciting new market that came with almost guaranteed returns. But the truth was a far cry from the slick and elaborate sales pitch. And the investments that cost them more than £65,000 are now worth little more than fresh air. The City of London, one of the biggest financial centres in the world. Billions of pounds change hands here every day. Fortunes are made and lost in a heartbeat. Money never sleeps. But away from the well-known markets in stocks and shares, London's traders also buy and sell commodities, ranging from precious metals to coffee beans. And it was one of those alternative investments that Gareth Slight and his fiancée Andrea Watson found themselves being talked into. In the process of setting up their own business, they were looking for opportunities to make their money grow. And one that promised a return of more than 60% sounded the perfect way to do it. Gareth and Andrea were approached last August by a firm of brokers called Diffraction Limited, trading as Diffraction Investments, who told them about an exciting new market in carbon credits, something most of us would never even have heard of, let alone totally understand. But the pitch was all very convincing, and the couple decided to invest more than £2,500.
So initially we put in a small amount just to test the water, which is what she suggested I did.
Gareth and Andrea were told the investment, in Andrea's name, would mature in just 4 months, which was perfect timing, as they were looking to raise money towards setting up their own business. But that first £2,500 wasn't enough for Diffraction. The company's wealth manager started to befriend the couple and to offer them more investment opportunities.
She'd be ringing me regularly to say, hi, how's things going, how are you doing? We decided to come down and meet them. Before we did any further investments, because we didn't want, first of all, we wanted to see that it was a reputable company, that they were normal and reputable people, and just to get some more information, see the officers and see where they worked.
And they weren't disappointed. First, the couple were whisked to a meeting at Diffraction's luxurious offices right in the heart of the city, in a building packed with other brokers, investment firms and traders. The offices looked the part, and the team from Diffraction could also talk the talk.
They did give us a very good comprehensive pack, which looked very professional, I have to say. So we were like already thinking, well, yeah, this is good. You know, this will tie in with our business investment.
And the courtship continued as the couple were wined and dined at an exclusive London restaurant.
I remember him saying, you know, would you like to pick the red wine? I looked at the prices and I thought, oh my God, this is just really expensive. And he went, don't pick the cheap one. Well, it was very difficult to actually find a cheap one, to be fair.
Yeah. We talked about our personal lives and we didn't talk much about carbon credits.
So what exactly are carbon credits? Well, they were created as a way of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. High-polluting companies are officially allocated a certain number of credits, giving them permission to emit a particular amount of carbon dioxide. Clean companies, who don't use all their credits, can make money by selling them to dirtier companies who'd otherwise face big fines for polluting the environment. But what Gareth and Andrea weren't told is that carbon credits aren't really suitable for everyday investors like them. Justin Urquhart-Stewart is a financial commentator with experience of market trading and investments.
The carbon credit market was designed so that companies can buy the right to emit all those toxic fumes. So effectively they're paying for it. Now, by buying these elements, they can then effectively be traded if they so wish. So it created a secondary market. But this is all about institutions and large institutions, big oil companies, others, wishing to make sure that they are actually protecting themselves with these carbon credits. And so they will trade it amongst themselves and some big institutions. It is very, very definitely not for the retail market.
But that didn't stop Diffraction convincing Gareth and Andrea that the carbon market was the key to their financial future.
The way that they built it up was basically, you know, by this time next year, you probably will have X amount of pounds and you'll be able to reinvest because there'll be that opportunity again and reinvest. And you know, in 5 years' time, you could be, you know, millionaires.
The couple had spent the whole day in London being seduced by Diffraction's slick and persuasive sell. And it worked. Gareth and Andrea agreed to invest another £50,000 in carbon credits and transferred the money into Diffraction's account. They'd now handed over £52,500. But Diffraction wanted more. 3 months later, Gareth and Andrea were persuaded to invest a further £13,000. But just before Christmas, they received a text message from a member of the team at Diffraction asking them to transfer the money into a different bank account than the one normally used.
I had, for a weird sense, to don't do it, and I should have gone with my instincts. Yeah. But because we were busy, I sent the money to that bank account.
Gareth and Andrea have heard nothing of that £13,000 again. It turns out the new bank account they'd been asked to pay it into belonged to an entirely different company called Oswald Bradshaw. But why they were asked to send it there and what happened to it afterwards remains a mystery. All that's certain is that it's bought them nothing. And unfortunately, things only got worse as it soon became clear that the rest of their investment, all £52,500 of it, wasn't all they thought it was either. Diffraction Limited told them they'd stopped trading in carbon credits and had transferred the couple's investments to yet another company. But this third business said they were no longer in the carbon industry either. leaving Andrea and Gareth stuck with carbon credits they can't sell. They might as well have bought fresh air. And sadly, financial commentator Justin Urquhart-Stewart can only agree.
What is the likelihood of us actually seeing a return from any of the carbon credits?
I mean, I suppose you've actually still got the credits and then they're actually sitting there with this, this custodian holding them there. But until you can actually find someone to trade them, and assuming they can be traded, then unfortunately they are just literally just paper and no worth, no more than that. Probably you frame it and stick it on the kitchen wall and just remind yourself, never again.
When we contacted Diffraction, they disagreed that the carbon credits had been missold, but said they'd only sold this type of investment for a short time. They told us issues in the carbon credit market were not apparent at the time of these investments, and although at that point they did believe it would be possible for the couple to sell the credits at a profit, this was not guaranteed, and they did not promise specific returns. They stressed their terms made it clear that there were risks, pointing to a clause that states investors may lose the whole amount paid, and that a call was made to Andrea to check she understood that. But they cannot comment on that final investment made to Oswald Bradshaw, as they have no link with the company, and the consultant who sold it has now left the business. So then we spoke to Oswald Bradshaw, who insisted they did purchase carbon credits for the couple and claimed they'd sent them a certificate to prove it. But Gareth and Andrea say they never received it. The company also told us that while they no longer offer the facility to buy carbon credits, Gareth and Andrea's credits are still live and safe. We also put questions to the company that now holds the carbon credits Gareth and Andrea bought through Diffraction, but they didn't reply. To cap it all, Diffraction now focus on another high-stakes commodity, diamonds, and they couldn't resist offering the couple yet another investment of a lifetime.
Even after all this, she sent me an email to my private email asking me about whether I wanted to buy a pink diamond, and obviously said what a lovely gift it would be for Andrea, you know, on your wedding day.
They shouldn't be allowed to trade, certainly, in this type of environment and get away with it. It's completely unacceptable.
We've put together a free booklet of tips and advice to help safeguard your hard-earned cash. You can download it from our website, bbc.co.uk/ripoffbritain. Or for a hard copy, send a stamped, self-addressed A5 envelope to the address that we'll give you at the end of the programme. You'll also find on the website lots more information on the topics that we tackle on the programme, with plenty of tips on how to save money and avoid being caught out.
Last year, we highlighted the really dreadful situation that countless small businesses had ended up in because of their bank. They found themselves saddled with costs of tens of thousands of pounds, and in some cases they faced going right under, thanks to something they'd never really wanted but had been talked into buying. This is a tale about the banks, accusations of mis-selling, and tens of thousands of businesses pushed to the brink by a financial product that many of them should never have been sold in the first place.
The people who these products have been sold to are small traders, farmers, people who are not used to dealing with sophisticated financial products. In many cases, they didn't even want these products. They didn't ask for them, but they were simply told by the bank, you have to have it in order to get the loan.
Small businesses taking out loans were offered products known as interest rate swaps, intended to protect them from a rise in interest rates, much like a fixed-rate mortgage. So when interest rates went up, the amount these businesses paid would be capped. But what borrowers say they were not told is that when rates dropped, their repayment amounts would increase significantly. And that's exactly what happened to the Lilly family, owners of Darby's Glass and DIY store in Marske by the Sea in Cleveland. In our last series, they told us how when they took out a business loan of £450,000 from HSBC in 2007, the bank also sold them an interest rate swap off the back of it. But a product they thought would protect them has instead ended up having a devastating effect on the family business.
I always had the attitude that if you went to the bank, you went for help and you would get the best advice. That seems to be something that's gone by the by.
We've paid HSBC £50,000 towards this base rate swap so far. We've laid off staff, We've had to put back growth of the business. To be honest, I'm pretty tired because I have to work all the time, and at most weeks I work 7 days a week, and I just feel very bitter.
That one's quite nice with a white border around it.
Have come down since they took out the loan 6 years ago. Their repayments have gone up by hundreds of pounds a month. And since we filmed with them last year, things continued to get worse.
We've struggled on. I've had to find money from my own finances. We've struggled with staffing levels, and stock levels have fallen. The effect is that we don't always sleep at night because we're worried about how we're going to survive the next day. And it's a day-to-day existence. If it wasn't for the internet side, which mainly is down to my daughter, then the business would have folded.
The big banks have agreed to review the sale of around 40,000 interest rate swap products like Derby's. Another of those badly affected that we visited last year was the long-established electrical store run by Paul Adcock and his family in Watton in Norfolk.
This is my great-grandfather, Ernest Adcock. 4 generations on, we've survived 2 world wars, depressions, booms, bust. The company at the moment is on its knees because the bank that supported us for all those years has thought it wise that we have this horrendous product.
Paul had also been left fighting to save his business due to an interest rate swap product sold to him by Barclays, one that's left him paying a huge £4,500 per month on top of the existing loan repayments. 1 year on and the doors are still open, but it's no longer the busy shop it used to be.
The cash starvation that we'd had because of these extra interest payments, you know, had really made it more and more difficult to trade. That our levels of stock really were depleted because of the cash flow problems. You know, we hadn't been able to sort of keep up to date with payments to suppliers, so consequently the major suppliers had not traded with us.
And low stock levels means empty shelves, something no retailer ever wants to experience.
People who weren't aware of the situation assumed we were having a closing down sale, but we had to sort of assure people, no, we weren't intending to close down. Just because of the situation we were in, we had no choice.
Businesses like Paul's were pinning their hopes on an investigation by the Financial Services Authority. And in January this year, the FSA found that interest rate swap products had been missold in over 90% of cases it reviewed as part of an initial study. The banking industry has since set aside billions of pounds to compensate small business owners affected. But Business Secretary Vince Cable has criticised Britain's biggest lenders for stalling on paying out.
We're now in the process whereby they're negotiating with the companies about the redress they will actually get, case by case. The worry of many of the companies that are now seeking redress is that the redress is not automatic, as it was in the case of Payments Protection Insurance, PPI. They're having to negotiate one by one with the banks. If they're dissatisfied with the outcome, they don't have any comeback.
But for Paul's business, it's good news. It's now been officially recognised that he was a victim of mis-selling by his bank, Barclays.
When we got the letter in the middle of June, it was a great relief, but there was also a sense of vindication that all that we had been saying and complaining about had actually been recognised by the bank. It was the wrong product, and at long last now, you know, there was some relief in sight in forms of redress.
With Barclays accepting responsibility for the mis-selling of the product, Paul is hoping that he'll soon be compensated and his business can recover, but he remains cautious.
We're not popping the champagne corks just yet because we don't know A, when it will arrive, and B, there are additional costs to be considered as well. So, you know, we're hopeful that it won't be ever so much longer.
When we contacted Barclays, the bank told us it continues to work with Paul to support his company through challenging market conditions, stressing it's in the interest of both Barclays and its customers to complete the review as soon as possible, and it's progressing as fast as it can. The Lilies in Cleveland are also hoping their troubles will soon be at an end. In June, they were told by the Financial Ombudsman that the product they'd been sold by HSBC had been unsuitable and that the bank should put right the effect it's had on their business.
We're waiting for a response by HSBC to see what our final settlement will be, and then we'll know exactly where we are financially. We want an outcome which shows that we haven't made any loss. The personal circumstances for us alter, that we are then comfortable again. We want to get the situation solved so that we can get the shop back on track.
HSBC told us it would be inappropriate to comment on matters which are confidential, but assured us the bank is doing everything it can to complete its past business review as quickly as possible, prioritising cases where customers are experiencing financial difficulties. Now, it remains uncertain exactly when and by how much both Darby's and Adcocks will be compensated by their banks. However, both family businesses will never be able to get back the years lost, worrying about the impact of being missold a product.
The whole experience has left me feeling quite bitter towards the bank and the way that we've been treated. The bank haven't been forthcoming with what is our money and not the bank's, and they're still not giving us it back yet.
The personal effect has been very stressful, need to say, and as for a family business, it doesn't just affect me, it affects all of the family because all our livelihoods depend upon it. And I'm sure this was the closest we actually came to closing the door for the last time because we were simply about to run out of money.
Here at Rip Off Britain, we're always ready to investigate more of your stories. Confused over your bills? Trying to wade through never-ending small print?
When they sit you down to sign up for things, they don't really give you the chance or the time to read through all of that small print.
Unsure what to do when you discover you've lost out and that so-called great deal has ended up costing you money?
I was horrified, and I haven't got that sort of money to waste like that.
You might have a cautionary tale of your own and might want to share the mistake you made with us so others don't do the same.
I feel that people have got to know about this business.
You can write to us at Rip Off Britain, BBC Key House, Media City UK, Salford, M50 2QH. Or send us an email to ripoffbritain@bbc.co.uk. The Rip Off team is ready and waiting to investigate your stories.
You know, as we hear all too often here at Rip Off Britain, money can be so easy to lose, but very hard to get back. And that can apply whether you're dealing with companies that are respectable household names or ones that are not so familiar. And who knows, maybe one or two that aren't that respectable either.
Yes, you really do have to be constantly alert to the possibility that someone might be trying to trick you out of your money or promising something they can't deliver. And that can be especially true online, where you can't always be sure exactly who you're dealing with or where they are.
But in the end, the key advice is to make sure you don't accidentally give out any personal details or any other clues that someone could use to get hold of your money. And if you're signing up for anything in person, do make sure, particularly if there are big sums involved, that you've taken proper independent advice. Well, that's where we have to leave it for today. That's just about it. But we'll be back with more of your stories. So until the next time, from all of us, bye-bye.
Goodbye. Bye.
Coming up, from garish to gorgeous. Transformations with Homes Under the Hammer next. Getting cash back for a lady left with a dodgy driveway. The sheriffs are coming at 11. And a couple caught in £1 million fraud with Claimed and Shamed at 11:45.